Welcome back. So now let's look at choosing a domain name and web hosting. Now you remember in our previous video, a domain name is a name of your website. So for example, this is a website, netloftHosting.net. This is a domain name, the name of the website. Now this is Jumia. This is the domain name, jumia.com.ng. So this is just a brief refresher from our previous course. And then now we need to learn how to choose a domain name and web hosting. In order to have a domain name and web hosting, you need to purchase from a web hosting provider. Now, a web hosting provider is simply a company that provides domain name and web hosting. And then there are several of them. There's GoDaddy, there's Namecheap, there's Netloft Hosting, which I showed you previously. So now, when choosing a domain name, there are things that you need to ensure. Now, one of those things is, first, you need to choose a short or easy to remember domain name. So let's say, for example, your company is called Divine Global Logistics Integrated Services Limited. Now, if you wanted to choose a domain name based on that company, you would probably say www.divinegloballogisticsintegratedserviceslimited.com. Now that is a terribly long name, and not many people apart from you will be able to remember it. So first rule of choosing a domain name is that you have to choose a name that is short and easy to remember. So you could search for the name divineglobal.com or divinegloballogistics.com. That's a better and a shorter name, and it's easier to remember. The second rule is that you have to check that the name is available to register first before proceeding. So once you've selected your short domain name you want to register, then you need to check whether that name is available, because the internet domain name, there is an established rule that once somebody has registered a name, you cannot register that name. So no name can be registered on the internet two times. So a company cannot go somewhere and try to register the name jumia.com.ng. It will never work. So your domain name is unique, and it is unique to only you. So when you want to choose, after you've chosen a short name, then you need to check whether that short name you've chosen is available to register. Now that leads us to our next point, which is point 3. If your domain name is not available, try changing its extension. So now let's take a look at extensions and what do they mean. So when you look at the name netloftHosting.net, for instance, now this portion that starts with a dot to the end, this is known as the extension. So there are different types of extension. There is .com, there is .net, there is .info. Look at Jumia. The first dot after the name starts here. This is an extension. So this is the .com.ng extension. Look at this website, Bellara.com. The name is there, Bellara, but from the first dot to the end, this is an extension .com. So there are various extensions. There is .com. Let's take a look at some common extensions. So you have .com, .edu, .net, .gov, .org, .info, .biz. So these are all domain name extensions. So let's go back to the rule. So the rule says if your domain name is not available, try changing its extension. So for example, if you are trying to check divineglobal.com and you find that it's not available, you can change it to divineglobal.com.ng or divineglobal.net. So you get the idea now. If your domain name is not available, the name you've chosen is not available, then try to change its extension. Now let's move on to rules for web hosting. Now when choosing web hosting, you have to ensure the following. 1. You have to ensure that the web hosting package has sufficient disk space and bandwidth. Now disk space, we already discussed that in the previous video. It is a space the size of the space where your website will be hosted. We'll look at this shortly. Bandwidth, on the other hand, refers to the amount of traffic that is allowed on your website. These two are very important keys to note: the disk space and the bandwidth. If you're buying a web hosting and the disk space, if you're buying a web hosting and the disk space and the bandwidth are not sufficient for your website will be suspended at some point because it has overused the resources. So you have to plan to choose the right disk space and the right bandwidth. We'll get to learn more about this shortly. Now, the second rule for choosing a web hosting package is you have to ensure that it has SSL, Secure Sockets Layer, to protect against hacking. So what is SSL? SSL means Secure Sockets Layer. How do we identify that the web hosting has this? So take a look at this website, jumia.com.ng. When you type it in a browser, you notice that there's a padlock here. That shows you that the site is secure with SSL. SSL prevents hackers from accessing some sensitive information on your website as it is being transmitted. So sensitive information like password, credit card information, and all of that, it is protected when you have SSL. So when you want to choose a web hosting, you have to ensure that that web hosting you're about to choose has SSL. Now we shall go into starting a website proper. So we're going to start a website proper. We're going to design a website for a company called Layla Dry Cleaners. It's a company, it's a fictional company. It doesn't exist in real life, but it's a company that we are going to design a website for. So now we are going to look at all the steps that are needed in order to create this website. So see you in the next video.